us, I hope. And Lisa and I welcome you guys tonight to join us. And tonight I'm going to say this is like part 2 of our Dark Sky program. Last month we had Tom Blackburn, and it was a very compelling program last month on the Nova Bird Alliance, and it was all about bird safety, particularly this time of year with migration and the issues with lighting and what damages that causes for birds outside of cats, I guess. Uh, lighting is the most difficult thing for birds, lights and windows. So this is going to be a part 2, and tonight we have Bill Burton, who is the president of the Analemma Society. And they're the group that for years, as you heard Alan say, have done most of the astronomical programs for the observatory for at least the past 12 years. And Bill is an emeritus research geologist with USGS right here in Reston, although right now he happens to be out in Colorado, and it's starting to get dark there maybe by this time. But Bill is sort of new, I think, to being the president, and he's a lifelong amateur astronomer as well. And he was very involved back in the 1990s with the initiation by the county to develop a outdoor lighting ordinance, and which now we've piggybacked on in recent times in 2022 with the Dark Sky Preserve Ordinance Amendment. So it's kind of cool to have Bill here. It's kind of like a full circle. So without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Bill so he can start talking from Colorado.
All right, thank you, Winnie.
Bill.
Let's see. Got that. All right, does that look good for everyone?
Looks great. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm giving more of much of this is kind of a historical talk, how we got to where we are in terms of light pollution awareness, because I'm actually more involved in the past than I have been in the present. Other good people have taken that on. And I'm going to talk, but I'm going to end up with things we can do, in terms of spreading the word and how to deal with neighbors and all that kind of, and I'll give you some case examples from my personal experience. So I'm going to start with this slide. Does everyone recognize this slide? This is Earthrise, which was taken by astronaut William Anders on Apollo 8 on Christmas Eve. And this became, as Apollo 8 was orbiting the moon, we all watched it on TV on Christmas Eve. And this photo became an inspiration for what great movement? The environmental movement, right? There's our blue marble out there, and it's got this a very thin atmosphere. And many people realize for the first time how much we really have to take care of it. So this picture was an inspiration for the environmental movement. And where's enter? Okay. Similarly, around at a little bit later, the US has been developing this fleet of satellites, and one of them is to detect nighttime lights. So this program, Defense Meteorological Satellite Program, run by NOAA, has been using a variety of sensors, the latest one called Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite, or VIIRS, and it's run out of not far from where I am right now, out of NOAA Boulder, with the PI being Chris Elvidge, although he might be retired by now. But looking at this picture and closer versions of this made people realize how much we are lighting up the night sky. And all those lights you see represent wasted energy. All that light is radiating into space, and we used to say, lighting the undersides of airplanes and not doing any good on the ground. So it was wasting energy, and of course it was lightening our skies and preventing us from seeing, the Milky Way and other celestial things. So back in the early 90s and before, our streetlights typically looked like this. This is a Cobra head luminaire. That's the technical term for a light fixture on the pole. And the light was high pressure sodium vapor. Everyone remember these lights? And the light was kind of this orangish color. And they were everywhere. I grew up outside of Chicago. There were thousands of square miles of these things on every corner for a long ways. And this was the typical light that I grew up with, and I bet you do too. When you went out in the country, you tended to see these guys, the 175 watt dusk to dawn, high pressure sodium vapor light. Again, the orange light. These at least had light sensors on them, so they'd go off at dawn. But farmers use these to light their farms, and just to cast light out into the darkness, give them a sense of security. Back then, you could actually, if you had one, you could put a shield, kind of a cowling over it, and make much more of that light go downward. But most of the time, and these are still around a lot, they're just these unshielded lights. So the light, no wonder we were lighting up the underside of airplanes. Lights like this were very common. In fact, the previous one, you can see it's not really shielded either. The light leaks out in all directions. So a high pressure sodium street light has this spectrum. And if you're trying to, that's very hard to filter out. So observatories near cities were realizing they were having a growing problem. And the problem was they could not put in filters to get rid of the light so they could do their research. So it was impacting, observatories in Arizona, Hawaii. So the low pressure sodium vapor street light was developed. Has anyone here seen these? It's a much more yellow. It's not an orangey yellow. It's kind of a yellow. And the first time you see this is kind of eerie. They're weird. I saw most in Hilo, Hawaii when I was working there. But the advantage, and of course, they had a new fixture that aimed all the light downward. And the name for that is now called full cutoff. Kind of an awkward name, but it means 100% of the light is aimed downward. And the spectrum of these is a single sodium wavelength that the observatories could filter out. They could put a special light pollution filter on their telescopes and eliminate that and get rid of a lot of the problem. But this is still the old days when you had these basically heated vapor lights. Then, so here's the US around that time. And, all those lights, Chicago, as I say, I grew up near Chicago, one of the worst light polluted areas. And it got worse in my lifetime. I grew up 35 miles from Chicago. I had a telescope. I could look at the Orion Nebula and all this stuff. But over the next decades, that sky was pretty much washed out. So in the early 90s, the Washington Post started a a science and technology section called Horizon. Anyone remember this section in the paper? It was on Wednesdays and it was buried inside the food section. So you had to know it was there. But this really neat science editor started this in February, he started in November of '94. And thank you. They ran an experiment in the paper. Now this is pre-internet, but they wanted everyone to go outside on a certain morning with a thermometer and measure the temperature and mail in the recording. There was no email, there was no internet. And they did that. And the Post published a couple months later a color-coded map showing the variation in temperature around the greater metropolitan region. I saw this and a light bulb went off, and I said, hey, we can do this for counting stars to measure light pollution. So I proposed it to the editor. He loved it. And this star chart was published in the February 8th, 1995 issue. And just a second, I get rid of that. Okay, good. And people cut it out, and they went outside during this period, February 18th to March 1st, and they circled all the stars they could see in this chart. This, of course, is Orion, probably the most recognizable constellation for everyone. And then they mailed that in to the Post. So we started getting input from that. Nearly 1,500 people mailed in these things, recording the number of stars they saw. And we had to weed some of them out because it turned out it wasn't perfectly. We kept tabs on clear nights. We, of course, wanted recordings from clear nights. Well, some people didn't do that. So there were various reasons why we had to eliminate some of them, but over 700 were usable. And then the Post had to hire this guy, a GIS guy, to figure out where their addresses were and plot them on a map. Again, this is before internet, before GPS, before all that stuff. So it was very labor intensive. But they finally published this map of the DMV with colored points all over the DC area. And the color coded with respect to how many stars you saw, dark blue being the most. So that was an interesting experiment, and it ran well. So I wrote this up with my colleague, Pete Gorell, in Sky and Telescope magazine. There's a picture I took down on the mall in this magazine, the following year, June 1996. And we were describing how the experiment ran. And then Pete, who was a geospatial engineer and statistician, took the point data and made this map. So we would call this a heat map now, but he was able to contour all that point data, the 712 good points, and he produced this heat map, showing the areas of light pollution in the Washington, D.C. area. And when this was published in Sky and Telescope, it was the first detailed map of light pollution in the United States. So that was really good. And Charles Olin, at the same time, was trying to develop the park, Turner Farm, the former dairy farm, into an observatory park. And he saw this map and he used this as part of his argument. So look at Great Falls. You see that big hole? So that's a hole in the light pollution that's everywhere else. I mean, look at the Sterling Mall. There's the hole. Charles took this to the county and added it to his pitch that Observatory Park, Turner Farm, should be a park devoted to astronomy. So that's a little origin story for you. Meanwhile, in Italy, they were taking those space satellite images, and they were making computer models that factored in things like topography, humidity, what's on the ground, and they used sky quality meters on the ground to actually develop ground truth the map that DMSP people had made 10 years earlier. And the guy I mentioned before, Chris Elvidge, is one of the co-authors on this. And so this became the basis for all our modern light pollution maps. And you can go online now and you can look up your city and you'll get a zoomed in thing of this map showing the level of light pollution in your area. So let's zoom in on Great Falls. So here's the same area I showed you earlier without all that contoured data. And here's the Italian guy's modern, computer modeled map. And notice, look at Great Falls. It's still kind of an inlier of darker skies in a more light polluted region. So this is our beachhead. This is the area we are trying to defend and keep this way or improve if possible. But, and this map can be used again in an argument, to your town council or whatever. We're trying to keep this little red finger from turning purple. We need to preserve this island or isthmus or whatever you want to call it, peninsula of darker skies in the Great Falls area. Now, in the early days, and at this International Dark Sky Association, which is now Dark Sky International, their main argument, this is pre-LED, was that to get lights properly shielded. So here's a diagram showing that. And we've all seen all sorts of these lights, these globes. Here's the colonial light that's popular in many areas. Here's a slightly better one that's only aiming the light downward. And then finally, a fully shielded light. And then ideally, that is on a timer. So it goes dark after it's no longer needed. And now, of course, we have the LED revolution. All those lights, I haven't seen one that isn't full cutoff. So all of their lights go downward. The energy used, they're far more efficient. And the light goes where it is needed. But the other things that were not anticipated at the beginning of the LED revolution have cropped up, including the spectrum use, because and the ease with which you can light an area. People, towns, governments have opted not to keep the light low, but to actually allow it to go brighter and pay the same energy bill. So they really liked the increased lighting, not realizing the impact it was having on dark skies. So here's a couple of these. Back when I was on the county lighting ordinance, LED was just coming in, and they had several pilot areas. This is outside Terracet Elementary in Reston. And it's overexposed on my iPhone. You can't really make out the fixture. But actually, these, curiously, are slightly different wavelengths, but they are narrowband, and you can tune them to whatever you want. So obviously, well, I'll get to that more in a minute, but we want a warmer light, which is a lower temperature. And that's called correlated color temperature. So the arguments now, it's assumed that you're going to have a full cutoff light fixture, a luminaire. That's not the issue. The issue then becomes, how bright is it? How many lumens does it have? And what color is it? And these days, what we strive for, what everyone should strive for, is 3,000 Kelvin or less. Ideally, even 2,700. But anything above that will really impact night skies. Why? Because blue light will travel farther. It scatters very easily. It travels far. So the light pollution from even a full cutoff blue light at 4,000 Kelvin will be much higher, maybe even than the traditional unshielded Cobra headlight that was there decades before. So one of the goals in fighting light pollution is to keep that temperature low, which paradoxically means warmer, because that's what we've always associated it with. The same Italians who have produced the night sky, the Atlas of light pollution, did a model of Europe. And on the left is the current artificial light levels. And on the right, if they converted every one of the existing lights to LED, but did not change the luminosity of that light, but made them blue, so that, again, that's up in this range, bright white tending towards blue, you get far worse light pollution, even if all the fixtures are aimed downward and so on, because of the effect of the blue light. So again, that's a real warning that we have to carefully monitor this. And let me tell you, it's a slippery thing, you know, trying to keep tabs on who controls this. I mean, Tim kind of mentioned it briefly, but there's a lot of ways that people cannot know what to do, and they can ignore it. And, you know, if they have a full cutoff light, they can make it blue instead, you know. So there's still a lot of ways to make our skies worse, unfortunately, thanks to this new technology. So a week ago, I was in Springdale, Utah, which is just outside Zion Park. We couldn't get a campsite, it was booked, so we had to get a hotel in town. But this is maybe one of the best streetlights I've ever seen. You can see it has kind of a yellowish light, so it's probably around 3,000 Kelvin. It's aimed down. It's got a really nice, stand for it, a pole. And then this part I'd never seen before. I didn't know about it. The light itself has these louvers. Now it's hard to tell, but each of these louvers is angled outward from the bottom to the top. So the top is kind of aimed, it's shunting the light from this view upward, towards the street. So if you go over to the picture on the left, then more light is aimed towards the street than the sidewalk. And the sidewalk's right under the thing. You don't need to aim light towards the sidewalk. That refers to something which I'm not really going to go into, except it's called bug rating. So every light has a bug rating, which is backlight, uplight, and glare. So glare and uplight are obviously eliminated, and these louvers, these Venetian blinds, eliminate much of the backlight. So that's a really neat street light. So now we're kind of at this point where, you know, we've gone past just having shielded lighting, and these are the principles we need to abide by. Use light only if it is needed. Direct light, so it falls only where it is needed. A low level of light. It should be no brighter than necessary. Controlled. Use light only when it's needed, i.e. on a timer, and warm color. So if you follow all these principles, that will go a long way to getting our light fixtures, you know, more responsible. So now I'm going to give you some real world examples from where I come from Reston. And curious, you could draw a straight line between them. They're all within a mile of each other, and they're all associated with the Wheelie-Reston Metro Center development. So the first one, which is almost laughable, is street lights on top of a building, on the BLVD condo building. So here it is. You can see it in the distance. I saw that for the first time. I thought, what the heck? There must be a swimming pool or something. So I went to the ordinance online, the county ordinance, and it was quite easy to find out how this would violate, except for the use of lighting fixtures, et cetera, shall not be permitted on the roofs of buildings. There it is, black and white, right? Clear violation. So I filed a complaint and was told, not in writing, that the fixtures had already been approved. So it was too late to do anything. And indeed, they're still there. So number one, you got to have your timing. You got to get in early on this. People are unaware of this stuff, and you've got to act quickly. So this one didn't do any good. Okay, violation number two. This is a few hundred yards from the last one. Street lights on Sunrise Valley Drive. So they put in this apartment complex. Here's Sunrise Valley Drive on the right. And they put in, not only were the lights too bright, too close together, which is debatable on whether you can call someone on that, they were aimed out into the street, okay? Which means they were shining right into the eyes of drivers going by. Talk about a bad bug rating. So, as soon as this went in, I said, this is absurd. So this one and the last one, so I made a slide. Here we go. Full cutoff lighting fixtures, outlined in red, shall be mounted horizontal to the ground. And so I outlined that, and I included the photo, and I sent both this one and the last one to Walter Alcorn, our supervisor. And it was within days, it was fixed. How'd they fix it? Well, these things are on hinges. All they had to do is come by and tilt each one horizontal. So it was an effective protest and an easy one to fix, except for it's still overlit. We like to refer to this kind of lighting as prison yard lighting, not a very flattering term. They could get rid of every other one of those things and still have fully adequate lighting for that. But you know what? This gets by. Well, that we're not in, this is not Reston Association. So the county approved this. The county can be dense. They don't get it. They just see the black and white line drawing, the blueprint, and they, oh, okay, that looks good, not realizing the real life consequences when you actually are there at night. Okay, number three occurred this spring. And there are these businesses this is right across the street from the last one. So the line of business, strip mall, you're looking at the back of it from the golf course. And they had some vandalism. They had graffiti sprayed on the brick wall, and they decided to put in security lights. And they did, and they were aimed outward across the golf course and into the windows of the people on the other side of the fairway. Well, what do we call that? That, of course, is light trespass. That's addressed in the county. So I called that one into the county, I forget what it is, building, which department it is. But this time I got a personal response from one of the field engineers, and he said, I want to look at this, tell me where it is. And I said, it's great. Of course, it would be better if you go talk to the owner of the strip mall than me. And he said, I will do that. This is a clear violation of the county outdoor lighting ordinance. So he did that, and a week later, it looked like this. What did they do? All they had to do was aim the lights downward. It was understandable that they put lights out there because they'd been vandalized. We get that. But they aimed them all downward, and that solved the whole problem. So again, an easy fix. But then things get a little gnarlier. So this spring, the Reston Design Review Board, which looks at all these, and this is Reston Association. Here's a house on a peninsula overlooking Lake Newport. And that's why my title for the slide is McMansion Uplighting. So and the impact is doubled. Look, you got the reflection in the lake. Oh boy, double your fun here. So there are 100. Some of them were approved beforehand. The new appeal for they had a 50 in outside already, and they were adding another 50. So 100 lights, almost all of, some of them shining up into the trees and, shining in the house. Look what a great house we have. Clear violation of those 5 principles that I just showed you. The light isn't needed. It's not aimed, it's in the right direction, and it's not on timers and all that kind of stuff. Now I put in here, so when I was working, I worked with Reston Association to develop their own lighting policy. And I made several presentations to the design review board. And my champion was this guy here, Richard Newland. Richard Newland was fully on board with responsible lighting, curbing light pollution, all that. Well, guess what? He retired. So he leaves, and then you got these people, and that's all it takes. You lose one person and you lose the battle, because the rest of them aren't really thinking about it. It's not uppermost in their brain about how to, deal with responsible lighting. So this is a tragedy. I'm sure the neighbors are real pleased at this fiasco. And then this, now Tom showed this the last month, and I'm showing again. He talked about, impact on birds, and this had gone in a few weeks before. So what are we going to do about this? Well, I'm not sure. They don't have any glare. It's not much in the way of glare. The key issue is what? The spectrum, the light spectrum. If I were going to address this, and I probably will try to when I get back, I would talk JW Marriott and putting in a warmer color. That will alleviate, some of this glare. Well, it's not technically glare. All the lights are indirect and hidden, but it's too blue. And I'm going to have to convince someone of the impact on migrating birds. So these violations, especially in a rapidly developing area, are going on all the time. And boy, you got to stay on top of things. And frequently, they get approved. Again, this is not RA jurisdiction, it's county. And someone approved it, because they're looking at a blueprint in their office in the daytime. They don't understand the nighttime implications. So back to getting more local. Here we are at Turner Farm, which was applied for this dark sky park permit. Here's part of the checklist, page 6 of 13 pages of requirements. Tammy Schwab has been spearheading this. She helped a lot, Christina Wenk and others, and they're going through this list. And as of August, it was nearly complete. Tammy said they have a couple more light fixtures to fix, and they have to do. This requires regular sky quality meter measuring. I'm not sure if that has to get down to a certain level. It may, or we just have to keep monitoring, which is what I understand. So that again, so you guys are fighting a campaign in Great Falls, and I would use that map I showed you earlier, where to keep that peninsula of dark sky in Great Falls, and this thing, once this gets approved, we want to try to preserve all this. Okay, and I'm going to leave you with some real dark skies. This is, I went out, got out of the tent at 9 p.m. in Bryce and put my iPhone on a tripod and took a 30-second exposure of the Milky Way right overhead. And there's so many stars in the picture, you can't tell where the constellations are. But Cygnus is over here, and it's actually pointing to the right. So it's over here, and getting into Cassiopeia is buried over here somewhere, and the double cluster in Perseus, we show that a lot in the Turner Farm telescopes. The Observatory Park is over here, and up here this fuzzy patch is the Andromeda Galaxy. And notice all the detail you can see. Those are dark hydrogen clouds They haven't been turned into star matter yet. It's raw material hanging around in the Milky Way, waiting to be made into new stars. But that's what it's like. All right, it's a little exaggerated. It's a 30-second exposure, but you get the idea. And then it was a bitterly cold night. My wife and I were shivering in the tent, but I forced myself out at 6 a.m., same view. This is the winter Milky Way. So 6 a.m. in the morning, and we have Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. On the left, the good old Orion constellation. Look at Betelgeuse. Look how orange it is, and Rigel is so blue. Taurus, the bull, there are the horns of the bull going to the right, and of course the Pleiades. And there's a lot of detail on that too. We don't really think of the winter Milky Way as having much, but unfortunately, you got to get out to really dark skies to see that. So that wraps up my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for making it relevant to our area too. And I love the wonderful slide. I'd like to get a copy of that show outlining Great Falls. I remember you telling us all about it when we first met with you.
Yeah.
And that wonderful discovery back in the 1990s of this little pocket here. And hopefully we still kind of have it, but the Italians think we do.
You got to
Anyway,
fight
so
for it.
far. That was
Defend your area.
fantastic. So
Yeah.
part 2 of our Dark Sky program is just as good as part 1. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I know people have questions. So anybody out? I see hands are raised. I don't know who was first. Meg? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Bill. I was interested in following up on the JW Marriott Hotel, and I was wondering if you knew anybody at Marriott or the design or construction company, or possibly even Fairfax County, that we could write to see. I know Fairfax has technically approved this, but maybe there's something we can do through Fairfax County.
Yeah. I don't have any Marriott connections. Is it Boston Group? I'd have to go over there and go to the trailer and pound on doors, because it's all still surrounded by construction fence. I was going to, and Tom gave a good contact last. I wanted to get involved in bird fatality monitoring, but you can't even get to the base of the building yet. At least you couldn't the last time I was there. And I would like to, start a database there of what birds are hitting the light. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to tell you about, who to contact. Do you contact Marriott, or do you contact the developer? I don't know. I would think appealing to a higher up in Marriott would be pretty effective. And in that case, I would definitely use the bird strike kind of argument, because it's such a tall building and so bright.
I was actually told by my friend with Marriott, who's been high up in it for many years. He is retired now, though. He said most likely it's the construction company.
Yeah.
That would probably be best to start to work with. Usually they're the management. Marriott comes in there and they manage it and run it, but
yeah.
it's a marriage.
The Google next door, they change their lights all the time. I wasn't home for Halloween, but I'm sure it was orange and black, and Christmas will be red and green, and solidarity with Ukraine is yellow and blue, and they do that on a whim. So obviously the technology is there to change the lighting and get it away from that awful blue color that goes so far.
Oh, Bill, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I dialed in late, Bill, but what I heard was really both encouraging and discouraging.
Yeah, it's a tough battle.
And the lighting, I've lived in Great Falls for about 25 years, and the the lighting here is kind of out of control, like that house you showed at Lake Ann, and particularly bothersome along Georgetown Pike, our historic road that's on the National Register of Historic Places, and not only in Great Falls, but on part of that road that goes into McLean. It seems like every year a new house is built with big pillars in front along the road and a fence with lighting along every pillar.
Mm-hmm.
And there were none of those 25 years ago. And now every year, at least another one or two. And the mansions there, of course, floodlit as well. It's turning what was a cherished roadway into a Dulles runway in those places.
Yeah.
Yeah. So GFCA was involved a few years ago with some lighting questions. One of the dilemmas we have is that whenever there's a subdivision or even a commercial renovation, that the county comes in and says, oh, well, we need new streetlights here. And we always seem to be fighting a rear guard action. And it doesn't matter really that those streetlights are full cutoff and so on, because the lighting is still reflected down all night long, regardless of any traffic, onto this pavement, and the pavement reflects the light back up into the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a particularly egregious one on, if you know where the Auberge Chez Francois restaurant is,
Right.
which is, as you know, kind of in a dark corner of Great Falls. Just west of there is a new subdivision with 6 houses. And in an area that in Reston would be equal to a half a block, the county has installed three overhead streetlights.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in an area that before had 0, now will be bathed, and that doesn't even count what the houses, which are big McMansions, will no doubt be bathed in lighting as well. What I wanted to say was that several years ago, GFCA was involved in the development on Georgetown Pike, where 14 houses were being built. Falls, what's it called? It's over near the St. Francis Church. And we got very involved with Rachel Flynn, who was the deputy director for Fairfax County at the time. And Rachel was great. She realized that installing 3 streetlights along that spot on historic Georgetown Pike in an area that is considered dark skies dependent was a bad idea. And she proposed several items affecting the public facilities manual. And I had the impression that she was going to make those permanent, which would have called for different lighting considerations all along Georgetown Pike. However, Rachel, I learned a little while ago, has left. And so I did talk to the county officials that are involved in this kind of stuff. And they got back to me and said, oh, nothing was ever done. Mm-hmm. So Rachel had great ideas, but they were never implemented.
Yeah.
So how can we change the public facilities manual so that every time there is a little development, I mean, 6 houses is hardly a giant project.
Right.
That in Great Falls, we don't find out about them until it's already been installed and it's too late.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is that we have street lights everywhere, and our dark skies will be shot not necessarily by all the McMansions being lit up, but by things that Fairfax County is doing themselves to us.
Yeah. Well, the county lighting ordinance is 30 years old, pre-LED, and it was concerned mostly with really outrageous lighting examples, like the street light on the roof, and curbing that, and light trespass. There was nothing to do with really light spacing, because there is an optimum lumens you want to strive for. So the spacing of the street lights, I don't think is really there in the ordinance, and the spectrum used, the color correlated temperature, and all that stuff. And I think we get a really, and I don't know who's going to spearhead this, redraft, get a new ordinance, and then hopefully can you maybe then, although everything will be grandfathered in, when it go time to change the fixtures, they can say, okay, you're going to sunset this fixture or a set of lights or something, because I don't know any other way to do it. And yes, the county can be its own worst enemy. You're right, because they're not really aware of what they're doing. They don't understand the nighttime impact of this. We need stronger lumen enforcement. What do you really need to be safe? So when I was working with the Reston Association, this is about 10 years ago, I physically mapped, I walked every trail, and I mapped all of the lights, street lights and everything. And I produced a map of all the outdoor lights in South Reston. Took a lot of hours at night, but I wanted to show, not just to get rid of them, but I wanted to show you there are actually areas, because you have to kind of go both ways. There are areas that do need more lights, and you have to acknowledge that. So in this intersection, this lonely intersection of a pathway, there's no light. Sure, let's put in a good light, full cutoff, not too bright, 3000 Kelvin or less. And by that, doing that, I said, there's some we really don't want any more of, and we want to preserve certain areas. And we gave that to the design review board. Then my champion retired, Larry Butler. I mean, again, it can hinge, and Richard Newland retired from the design review board. It can hinge on a few people, your person, Rachel, so I don't know what to say, except you just got to keep at it. And we really need there's something called a model lighting ordinance. And we need to go back to that. That was developed originally by IDA, now DSI. And we need to go back to that model lighting ordinance and try to get at least part of that, pushed through the county. And it's going to take a lot of work.
So if I could just have a follow-up question, you mentioned that you'd contacted Walter Alcorn's office.
Right.
Obviously, our supervisor is Jimmy Bierman.
Right.
Bierman and Alcorn would have some powerful sway if they were behind something like this. Is Alcorn likely to support this, or is he too afraid of the developers?
Well, I sent that letter to him, and the street lights along Sunrise Valley were changed quickly. He couldn't do anything about the street lights on the rooftop, but he got the others changed. And so, yeah, I would say he's responsive. He's also, go ahead.
And do you know if the Reston Citizens Association, RCA, is involved in lighting issues?
I can't address that. We have an environmental group that puts out a yearly report addressing lighting, but it's pretty generic. Our RCA has been concerned with density issues, keeping the density down, or confining it to the high density corridor along the metro station. I'm not terribly active with them now, but I don't think they've dealt with lighting issues specifically. They're more into keeping lighting down. And of course, there's the golf course development in Reston, which brings up a whole, and we've been fighting that for 25 years, which will bring its own monstrosities, so.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for what you're.
Yeah,
everything
I'm
you're
sorry I
doing.
can't be more help, but it's just a lot of work. And
Yeah.
the more I think of it, I think I would go back to the MOLA, and which you can get online. DSI probably has it on their website, and look at that and see how that differs from the county ordinance, and try to push through, the improvements that are necessary.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Lisa.
Hey, Bill. I was wondering if you could talk about the light pollution maps. If you have any ideas for creating a local map, I think that would be helpful for us to track how things are changing over time. And Bill brought up a good point of we should probably have a map overlaying our collective crowdsourcing of where we think the lighting problems are today that we could tackle. Then we could talk about it as a EP committee.
Yeah.
But
Do you want to see the map again? Or
if you could send Winnie or I the
Yeah.
link to whichever map that you think is like the most credible that we should be referencing when we talk to.
Yeah. Well, if you want to get more granular, it would be getting these sky quality meters and going out and making measurements in a repeated sense. So we're now amassing a database for Turner Farm. Is the lighting getting better or worse? And you could do that anywhere. And I've been in the past, I'm not currently, but it's a great science fair project for a kid. It's an untapped thing for a student to get one of these. You can check them out of the county library and go out and monitor, especially in an area that's being developed, monitor the deterioration of the night sky. And that would be a good graphic example. And better. I mean, it would be much better than that satellite, mostly satellite thing I showed you. That's very crude. It's pixelated and stuff. To make something similar to what we had 30 years ago with the post data, nice, brightly colored, smooth thing. But instead of covering the entire DMV area, you're covering, a few square miles, or the township of Great Falls, and do that regularly. And students would be perfect for doing that.
Okay, I think that could be something we dig into, because we have members located across Great Falls. I don't know how many meters the library has, but if we could get at some training, I think we could maybe get a small group of people.
Yeah. And I have to confess, I have not used one. So I'm old school. I count stars in Orion, I haven't gotten up to the 21st century yet. But we used to use what we call limiting magnitude, which is the faintest star you can see with your naked eye. And I've always thought that was a great indicator. And around that area, it might be 4. In my campsite, it would be limiting magnitude 7. Now, magnitude goes the reverse of what you think. A higher number means a fainter star. So, and each one of those is exponential. So, the lighting in Bryce is 1,000 times, the light pollution is 1,000 times less than it is in Great Falls, and so on. But in any case, you have to build a database, and then you can demonstrate to whatever government, the deterioration of this. So when those lights, at Auberge, I don't know, you might not have anything beforehand, but whatever is coming up, you can show that. And there may be other ways to address it with current lighting. I'm not sure how, but you could do a transect from an area is dark over to that development and show the deterioration of the light. Or you can do the old-fashioned count the stars in Orion. When I'm sitting in this development, everything's washed out. And if I go a mile over in this direction, I can see so much more. So things like that. But I think people are going to have these graphic, displays in front of them to really see the difference. No one knows what the Milky Way looks like anymore. You know, that hardly anyone's bemoaning the loss of the Milky Way who isn't an astronomer, because they've never seen it to begin with, you know. So you got to drag them out in the country or something to do that. But and of course, the observatory, one of its missions to maintain its status will be to do regular education on light pollution. So displays, presentations, and so on. Anyone else?
This is Ed. One quick question.
Yeah.
Are there inexpensive spectrometers that you can go measure the wavelengths of street lights, you know, the brightness, the warmth of those lights? Because most of when I've seen them online, they're thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
Are there inexpensive ones?
I don't know. Alan, do you have an idea of this? I'm sure there got to be cheap ones. But I can't really say. And I don't know exactly what the sky quality meter, I confess my ignorance in this. It may have some spectrum capability, but
I'm more interested in measuring street lights or people's porch lights to see how you know, how much lumens they're producing
Right.
and what wavelength.
Yeah.
I can add the sky quality meter that you buy from Unihedron, I think it is. No, they just give you a single readout in terms of magnitude per area, like a 14.9 or 18.9. It's a simple readout to get.
Okay, so they
get
don't
a
do it.
measurement. Get a measurement of the spectrum. I mean, with LED lights, you can at least just tell visually whether it's blue, you know, how
Right.
blue it is, how white it is. It's just, I get very depressed by the sheer number of really obnoxious bright blue lights that are out there. And I personally find even 2700 Kelvin lights still radiate a lot in the blue, which is 2000 Kelvin or so would be a much more common type
Yeah.
out there. You don't see those sold in Home Depot. You just see, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 Kelvin outdoor lights to put outside your house, widely sold at Home Depot. People will use.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, you know. Well, in the old days, we had to go after Dominion Power, and Dominion Power had all these high pressure sodium luminaires, and they wanted to get rid of them because they knew the LED was coming, and that's what they sold you. And they made up a song and dance about, oh, you know, it's going to be, this will be your cheapest option, and we've got them on the lot already, and so on and so forth. And at least we don't have to deal with that anymore. I mean, LED lights are so much more flexible, and you could be so creative, like that street light in Springdale, Utah that I saw. But we're still in the early primitive stages of these things. They're kind of a brutalistic, you know, square-headed with harsh blue light. And it's going to be another evolution we have to go through to get away from that. And it's just going to take a lot of arguments.
Thank you.
So I hope you can find, if you find something, let us know, because that is really a good thing to know how to measure the color temperature. I'm sure I can find out easily. So. Anyone else? There's something in the chat. What's that? Okay, Tim signing off. I guess that's it. I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I will share with Winnie the presentation.